What's up guys, welcome to this review of Star Wars: The High Republic, The Battle of Jedha by George Mann. Here, everyone's gathering on Jedha. The peace treaty between Erum and Erino are now gathering here on Jedha, being monitored by the Jedi. Meanwhile, you've got other Force-related cults and groups and religious groups all gathering on Jedha as well because it's a holy place. All in time for chaos to erupt. This is an audio presentation, an audio play you might want to say. So it's not a novel, it's not a book, it's not a comic, but there is going to be a script version releasing in February here in the UK. I don't know when it's releasing anywhere else. But I've listened to the audio production, I've listened to it all. It's about 5.5 hours long, I believe. And here's what I think. I think it's okay. So this is a very important, very pivotal story in Phase 2 of the High Republic. It's continuing Phase 2. The problem with this book is that, or this presentation, is that not so much its story, not so much its characters, not so much anything that happens in it or what it's about, but the way it's presented. The problem is that it is audio, and there's nothing wrong with having an audio presentation, but without a clear narrator, without someone explaining what's happening on a visual level, all you've got is characters reacting to things. All you've got is characters saying stuff and talking to one another, which means that when this battle erupts, yeah, spoilers in the title, there is a battle, there is a huge fight that goes on. It eventually just kind of becomes noise, and you don't really know what's going on for the most part. So the first half of this is quite interesting with all the characters moving into place, getting a sense of who's who and what's going on. But then the battle happens and it's just a bit messy, to be honest, and I didn't really know what was going on most of the time. So pretty disappointing the more it went on, in my opinion. I think if there was a narrator describing some of the action scenes, describing what was happening, and maybe reducing the amount of one-on-one conversations that were there, it could have fared better. And I think the script version of this will fare better because of that as well. And in relation to this, it's sometimes hard to tell who's speaking, because certain scenes you'll have one character enter and basically say, hey Creighton, therefore you know it's Creighton in the scene. Other times though, they don't do that, and you're relying on their voice. Well, some of the voices aren't exactly distinct or too different from one another, particularly some of the female voices, I've got to admit. And speaking of the voice acting, I think the voice acting is actually good across the board. I don't think there's a single bad voice actor. There's a couple of like the supporting ones where they're clearly playing it up, they're playing certain characters rather than people, let's say. And there are some corny, cheesy moments there, particularly when they're trying to do like alien dialects and stuff like that. But the voice acting's good, they do a good job of bringing the characters to life. It is disappointing that so many of the characters and the actors are putting on like generic British American accents. This is a galaxy far, far away, full of different people of different diversities and ethnicities and religions and races, and yet they all sound very like clear English, basically. So that's a bit disappointing. Again, there is like an alien character who distinctly speaks differently, but that's kind of it. So a bit disappointing that there isn't a huge range of diversity, especially when we've seen some of these characters in the comics, in the novels so far, and they've clearly got different ethnicities, different backgrounds, they're clearly from different locations, and yet they all sound the same. But as an audio presentation, of course, it turns the backing of Star Wars sound and music, and that's really cool, really fun. It adds an element to it. It makes it a bit more exciting, a bit more dramatic. It does rely a bit too much on the John Williams themes, I have to say, but that's a minor flaw, to be honest. But in terms of the characters, once more, I do have to say that we are introduced to a lot of new characters this time around, and a lot of the characters we have only been introduced in like one novel. So Creighton's son, for example, we've had one novel of him, and maybe he's in the comic books. I haven't got onto the comic books yet. I like to read them once they're all out. So a lot of these characters are being introduced for the first time, and because there's no narration or anything, we have no idea what they look like. We have no idea how old some of them are, and so it's really tough to imagine what certain scenes look like, what certain events look like, because We don't know who half of these characters are, what they look like, what they're doing, how they're interacting with the world. Yes, there is like Creighton's son, who we do have an idea of. There are some characters who we've seen in the novels, in the comics, and who have had concept art released. But there's a bunch more who, this is their first out. And it's really weird that some of the pivotal characters in this story just are faceless in certain regards. And again, unless a character comes up and says, oh, look at you, you've got a nice mustache. Guess what? You don't know if that character has a mustache or not. But it's not all bad when it comes to the characters. It is good to see Creighton's son in there. He's now got a voice. He sounds a lot like Obi-Wan, which is not at all how I imagined his voice when reading the last book. Salandra shows back in this one as well. Again, she's got a voice now. It's a good voice, but not at all how I imagined it. And yeah, it's great to see these characters interact. It's great to see their relationship. They clearly got a past. They clearly got similar views on the Jedi and so on and so forth. And it's also, there's a new droid introduced, which is actually quite fun. He's kind of trained or programmed rather based on his occupation. So he only ever speaks in like religious terms and slangs and stuff relating to like the Jedi and the Force, and it's sometimes a bit amusing. And that's like the comic relief here. And yeah, he's a decent character. Not one I'm gonna want to see more of, but he adds a certain element to it. But ultimately the story, what's happening here is that they're still teasing things. This is a prequel story at the end of the day, 150 years before Phase 1 of the High Republic, and it still feels like they're teasing things out, that they're still setting things up at this point. And yeah, the Battle of Jedha is meant to be this huge moment that then launches the next part of the story, and it could very well do that. But certain people, certain groups, they're still not aware of who the villains are at this point. We're still not aware of how large scale this is. It feels like a very small scale story because Phase 1 of the High Republic introduced us to like dozens of characters all at once, and in certain regards it was overwhelming. Phase 2, interestingly enough, has only gave us a few, and it seems to be focusing in even more now on just a couple of those as we're moving forward, as well as the villain side of things at the Path of the Open Hand. So yeah, it feels like this story doesn't push things too much forward in that regard, but it does up the stakes because of the battle. So there's a risk here of it becoming frustrating. There's a risk of it not giving us the answers we want, because at the end of the day, how many answers can the heroes get? Because at the point of the High Republic Phase 1, there are things that they don't even know yet. Like the level up, for example, and that creature's ability is completely unknown in Phase 1. Therefore we know that the level up here in Phase 2 can't do much. It can't be discovered, it can't be explored in much detail unless it's done by the villains or by people who don't survive to tell the tale. So yeah, there is that prequel risk that's going to happen here, and I think it's starting to happen. But yeah, I'm going to get into the one spoiler point now, so just be warned there, that there's a character who dies. I'm not going to name who the character is. A character dies at the back end of this production, and they make a huge, dramatic, big old deal about it. Problem is, I couldn't tell you what that character's name is off the top of my head. I'm going to have to research it and post it in this video. But yeah, the character's likable enough, but again, this is the only time we've seen them. This is their first outing. I have no idea what this character looks like. I can tell you what their occupation is, I can tell you what they do, I can tell you a little bit about their personality. But the audio production here tries to make a huge deal about it, tries to make it so emotional and pivotal and dramatic. But I just did not care about this character. This character, I did not know what they looked like, I did not know the things that they were up to, I didn't know why they were introduced at this point in the story. And yet, it's just weird that it's so much of the back end of this book story focuses on this character's death, as if it's meant to be this big launching point of motivation for other characters. So yeah, it doesn't quite work. And I think the biggest problem at the end of the day of this story is the way that the story is presented rather than what the story is. So a bit disappointed. It might be interesting to go in and read the script version. I might enjoy that more. As it is though, Star Wars The High Republic, The Battle of Jedha is just okay. It's got some good characters in there, there's good dramatic scenes in there, there's good debates and conversations in the first half. But because of the audio production element, there's so much that just feels very limited. There's so much that feels like it's being overlooked. There's so many missed opportunities, and when the battle begins in the second half, it just kind of becomes a mess of noise and I didn't really know what was going on half the time. So yeah, disappointing, but not terrible. And if you've liked this review, why not subscribe to my channel to get more content like this, and follow me on Twitter and Instagram at @the_Grant Burton as well. Until next time though, thanks for watching.